back here on the Cover 3 podcast on Wednesdays. We do like to go inside the matchup. Save those best bets for Thursdays. It's a big game breakdown. And we do begin in Athens, where Tennessee will be arriving to take on their old SEC East foes. We've seen 2 years ago, this like very highly anticipated matchup, and it was Hendon Hooker and the like big high powered offense coming off the Alabama win. And while there were elements, like it was a heavy rain game for sure. The way that my memory has this, Kirby Smart and that defense kind of shut them down pretty early, and we're just able to sit on it the rest of the way. Now, the Georgia offense, I would say, is not as good as that Georgia offense was in 2022. The Georgia defense, I think, is probably the stronger part of the 2024 team, but I don't know if I would line those two up and take them. But we've also got big changes in terms of the Tennessee offense as well. Tom, when you start to break down this matchup, how much can we learn from previous Josh Heupel, Kirby Smart matchups that we could apply moving forward, looking at the Bulldogs and the Vols?
I don't know. Like the difficult part of that question is Josh Heupel's offenses have been much better in the past
than this
one has been. So then you throw in like I expect him to play, but the mystery surrounding Nico, and like he's been in the concussion protocol. How healthy is he for this game? How prepared will he be? How much time will he spend practicing? The reports were that he practiced yesterday, so I assume he's going to get a full weekend. But it's just, how explosive can that passing attack finally look? Because even last week against Mississippi State, which is a horrible, horrible defense, like they looked better while Nico was in there in the first half. They hit some big throws, but they still didn't look incredibly dangerous to me. Like there were still problems. The only difference was they didn't drop as many passes as they have been all year. So I still think going into this game, the run game is going to be the focal point of Tennessee's offense, which it always has been. It's just they've had much more explosive passing to go along with it. I don't know if that will be there. And then on the other side, we spent a lot of time talking about Carson Beck, who is very, very turnover prone in the last month or so. He's been playing terribly. There aren't a lot of guys stepping up in the receiving core to kind of make plays out of nothing and give him a little bit of relief. The run game is it's an odd run game. Like they're good at staying on schedule with it. Like they have a high success rate, but they have basically no big runs. And it's really hard to keep drives going if you have to rely on your run game and there aren't any big runs. So you would think that for them to have a more success in this game offensively than they've had lately against anybody, you need to see that run game take a step forward. But again, for both of these teams, they're both going against really good run defenses. So how are they going to be able to do it? To me, it kind of comes down to Nico's been shaky all year. Carson Beck has been very shaky the last month. Can either of them get their crap together for this game? Because I think the one that does, that team is going to win. And if neither of them do,
Agree with that. You think about what Tennessee's biggest win was this year, right? The defense kept them in the game against Jalen Milroe, who certainly didn't have the level of juice, burst-wise, that he showed against Georgia in the first half or against LSU last week. And Tennessee's defense is going to have to keep them in this ball game as well, most likely, unless you think they can just light Georgia up, which I don't really. Like, Ole Miss scored last week on Georgia, but Georgia still played hard. Ole Miss got them on a few formation stuff, but they also had very favorable field position in some of those instances. It's not like Ole Miss ran up and down the field on UGA. And I don't think at home that Tennessee can do that consistently. Tennessee's defense is going to have to create extra chances for them. They're going to have to create short fields. And look, that's very possible. Like, Tate has come back from the tightrope surgery, but he hasn't come back effectively. And Tennessee has, I mean, you can kind of take your pick, but I think that we can reasonably say that Tennessee has a similar level of defensive line to what Ole Miss has. I think they should be able to get after UGA's offensive line. And maybe that like being at home for UGA solves that. Certainly there's a possibility there. But Georgia's offense has not really looked right for several weeks. I'm sure they'll try to scheme up some stuff, to Bell and throw the ball around to Lovett. But without McConkey and Bowers and playing a real schedule this year, or not a real schedule, because that kind of says what they played last year wasn't real. And I don't think that's true. I think that it was a fine schedule. It just wasn't very deep, obviously. The committee decided to leave them out last year after they lost a close one against Alabama. Playing a real schedule has kind of exposed them. I am very curious, and I do think Nico's playing, by the way.
Yeah, me too.
I think if he wasn't playing, this line would not be 10, okay? Because, right now, you look at it, let's say home field, UGA, first night game in
3.5.
First good night game in a long while. Was Ole Miss, they were what? They were night game last year, right?
Yeah. I would have to look it up.
I thought Ole Miss was a CBS game last
I thought
year.
it was a CBS game too.
Just went really long. It definitely finished at night. I can remember some of the plays.
There's daylight savings time.
Okay. And you have like weird betting stuff like in your brains. I had a lot of Georgia all game and like they were cashing when it was definitely nighttime.
I remember.
No, Steve Wilson says it was a night game. So
okay.
Bud's gambling brain remembers correctly.
But like from a line standpoint, let's call Georgia like 6 points better on a neutral than Tennessee, which probably feels about right, I guess, given that Tennessee, when they have a win over Hurt Milroe and like nothing else good so far this year. And I think Tennessee's a good team. Like I've fairly invested on them making the playoffs, going 11-1, et cetera. I still believe in this team. I think they can win the game. But if somebody knew Nico was out, this would run out to like 14 because we saw the backup against Alabama and it was only a play or two, but he was terrible. I mean, just trying to play like crazy hero ball stuff and just threw up an easy pick to the Tide. Can Tennessee's receivers win one-on-one? I think this is actually an interesting area because I think Georgia is gettable in the slot.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
And they put Starks there, yeah.
Well, we'll see like who Tennessee can win on that. But in a weird way, I kind of trust Tennessee to scheme like a couple guys open, and then it's just going to play like the variance machine. Like, does Nico hit him or not, assuming he played? I could see Tennessee winning this one by hitting, like maybe two big explosive plays like they did against Alabama a couple years ago, and then the defense forcing some turnovers. And I think it's gettable. Can they block Georgia?
Georgia blocked them.
Yeah.
That's really what it is to me.
Because right now, Carson Beck says it's the inability to run. Like that is what Carson Beck is saying. Like what is wrong with the offense? Carson Beck's explanation is we can't run the football effectively right now. He has offered suggestions in terms of we need to figure out a different way to play it. He has even offered up himself, said like maybe I need to get involved in the run game. I don't.
Not really sure people want to see that. But.
Yeah, I didn't.
I do actually. I would love to see that.
With another pick last week, we've now increased our count to 12, leading the country in that category. Throw in 2 lost fumbles, that is 14 turnovers. Again, Carson Beck is saying I'm trying to force things, but I'm trying to force things because we can't run the football. The offensive line injury issues, as even all the way back to Saturday night's reaction show, have been one of the big talking points all through the week. I don't know if that's fixed. I don't know if they're going to be able to run the ball on this Tennessee defensive front.
To Carson's comments, I agree with him that their inability to run the football is part of the problem. So I don't think it's total deflection.
But it sounds like deflection to me.
Not all those interceptions you've thrown have been because of your inability to run the football. They've been because you're just panicking and chucking the ball.
Right.
That's facts.
His performance under pressure is
it's pretty awful. Yeah.
It's a huge drop off from Carson Beck on schedule in rhythm. Which, I mean, shocker, but I just think that we expected from a quarterback who started the year in the Heisman Trophy discussion, in the NFL draft, first quarterback taken discussion. I just don't think that we expected him to look so common when it comes to the differences between the way that you perform on schedule and under pressure. And those changes have been much more like our expectations for a regular power conference quarterback. So, I don't know.
let's see here.
Like you guys think Tennessee's pretty live to win this?
Yeah, but I'm not. I don't know. Like I think both of these teams are live to win it, honestly. And I know that sounds silly because one of them's favored by double digits, but I'm just saying. I just I think the spread is not confusing to me, but it's interesting to me in that it's like, huh. So we still think Georgia, this current version of it, is 10 points better than anybody else in the SEC for the most part. That's still one of the top teams. So I don't know. I think Tennessee can win it. I also think Tennessee is very capable of getting its ass kicked in this
Yeah.
game because we've seen them like in the Oklahoma game, they won it, but the offense was horrible. The offense did not play well at Arkansas. So like we've seen them on the road in these spots play terrible football. So now they're on the road against Georgia. Can they get their act together on the road really for the first time this year? That's what remains to be seen because they haven't shown it to this point.
Money line, alt line. Like, but how about or there's probably a deficit or a margin that if Georgia can get out to with a strong start, I don't know if I trust Tennessee to be able to overcome it.
Definitely not.
Yeah,
and I think this is an important point because Georgia jumping on Texas early allowed Georgia to somewhat ignore like a lot of like the play action stuff that Texas does. Georgia not jumping all over Ole Miss early allowed Ole Miss to keep play action as a real consideration in the mind of those Georgia defenders, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's key. And if you look at Tennessee, like a lot of their stuff is that RPO stuff. That's going to matter quite a bit here. Like Tennessee is just a pure drop back team. I do think is kind of dead in the water. Although we thought that too against Bama late, and then Nico turned it on and carved it.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why the spread, like there's like a median spread, and then there's also like a ceiling spread. And like when you're doing your calculations, they're both going to factor into this. Georgia, I think Chip's point is so spot on. Like it absolutely has the chance to just blow the doors off Tennessee, especially if they get game scripted out of the ball game. I don't know that Georgia is a touchdown better than Tennessee on a neutral every day, but like Georgia's ceiling, I think, is probably way higher than Tennessee's.
And another thing too that I'm considering here is the up and down nature of the Georgia defense. Like it's been good for most of the year. It's been great in some games, but it played horrible against Alabama, responded the next week with, I didn't know it was Auburn, but they responded the next week with a very good game against Auburn. Against Mississippi State, statistically, I mean, again, it's one of those situations, we've mentioned it, teams seem to be kind of coasting against Mississippi State, but still, they allowed 31 points to Mississippi State. If you're Georgia, I don't care if you're coasting or not. That's a bad performance for you. The next week against Texas, we all remember what happened. So then last week against Ole Miss, got carved up a little bit. Do they respond the same way they've responded the last two times they've struggled on defense? We'll see.
I think you'll see a lot of the Mertz game plan that Florida used against Tennessee, slowing the game down, boot stuff, not like obviously running him, but like I think you can throw short passes against Tennessee. Georgia has tried to get this screen game over this year, man. And like the communication's been weird, the timing's been weird. But like if you want to read into that, I mean, it's probably because they think like maybe their receivers are not the best at winning one-on-ones down the field. Maybe they're trying to limit how much influence Carson actually has on the game. And their pass protection stuff too has been an issue. Like Georgia's tackles have been kind of gettable, and then with Tate getting hurt and coming back, I would expect Georgia to keep trying that screen game a lot in this one because if nothing else, like they're completed at a high rate generally, unless you miscommunicate it like they did against Bama. And that's completed to a defender who takes it back away. But it also slows the game down. It makes Tennessee come up and tackle. That's something I would expect to see a lot of from UGA.
John Talty had a story on the Georgia offense on CBSSports.com this week. It was very good. I would suggest you go read it, as well as, reading Tom's quarterback power rankings, which go live on Wednesday.
They're already up. Getting yelled at about it right now.
Okay. Love to hear that. And in that, he included a note that I'd missed from post game. I think the description was that Lane Kiffin was like straight up giddy that Georgia had resorted to the screen game, which had let Ole Miss's coaching staff know they don't have any confidence in blocking us. Like they're already just trying to go to the same kind of game plan that an underdog has playing against better competition. I think that gave a big boost of confidence to the Ole Miss coaching staff, the defense in general. That I didn't think the screen game worked really well. You had some adverse conditions, obviously. They're in Oxford.
It hasn't worked. They just keep trying it.
Yeah, I know. It's just
yeah. I may just be like, maybe this is just what Georgia's offense is this year.
Yeah,
but the defense, the way they just absolutely slapped Texas has got to matter. Like that, if you're picking this game, that is still in your brain pretty hard.
Yeah. If you are Georgia, you do not want this to be a 3, 4, 6 point game in the fourth quarter. Because I do think I do think that's how Tennessee wins. Just by
pressing.
I think that you're hanging around, and that I think that you would rather have Nico holding the football than Carson Beck in a go make something happen possession. I think if you're Georgia, you would like to have a nice 10 to 14 point lead and only have to sweat the cover. And then you're just getting out of there with the win that you need to keep all of your hopes and dreams alive moving forward.
The weather for this game, by the way, is pretty nice for chucking deep balls. You got a projected 3-mile-an-hour wind in 54-degree weather.
54. That's like freezing, though, isn't it, for people in Georgia?
For us, yeah, I'd break out the sweater.
No, for Florida, but not for Georgia.
For Georgia, it's not freezing, but it's probably the first. I don't know. We got a lot of Georgia fans listen to this show.
It's the first Barber jacket game.
Is it? Yeah. Is this? Yeah. Is this the first one? You let us know in the chat.
It's 52 here, and I'm going golfing in a hoodie and shorts later this afternoon.
It is.